it's just like, I don't know.
Yeah. Who's this ex? How does he know my stuff? That's what I'm curious about. Are we gonna see your beautiful face?
It isn't beautiful today, but yeah, you
are. We need to see it, man. Okay, who else? It's kind of quiet. You guys are making me feel weird.
It's hecka quiet.
Like make some noise or something. So hello everyone. Hello beautiful people. Thank you so much for tuning into this special WiseAïchaTalks episode. All of the episodes are special, but this one is especially special because I have some amazing people that have volunteered their thoughts and their brilliant minds to talk about a topic that I think is important for a lot of us, especially a lot of us millennials, Black millennials and dating. So today we're going to be talking about dating while Black around the world. So I've gathered a panel of amazing, brilliant Black people who are all over the world or have lived in different regions of the world to come and talk about dating and, the little hiccups, the little interesting parts. And of course, it's a WiseAïchaTalks, so we're going to be very introspective with it so that we can all, build knowledge and recognize knowledge together. Okay, so we're going to go into the first question. Actually, before we go into the first question, I would like for the panelists to introduce themselves. So if you could please give me your name, your location, and what drew you to this conversation. That'd be amazing. So we're going to go ahead and start. Go ahead. Whoever wants to start.
I'll go. I'm Bawatokwe. I'm in Paris, and I'm really curious about what other people say. So I just want to learn and hear what other people have experienced.
Okay.
That's what drew me.
Thank you. Who's next?
Well, I can go. I'm Daniela, and I'm also in Paris, technically, but I'm in the Caribbean at the moment to visit my parents' house. And actually, the thing that drew me to this conversation is what I told you, Aisha. Actually, my ex sent me the link to your Instagram account, and that's how I discovered, your channel and what you're trying to build and this panel as a whole. So it's kind of excited to participate, but also curious to hear about other people's experiences.
Thank you. Thank you so much for coming. Okay, who's next?
Hello, everyone. My name is Lionel Edwards. Right now I'm in California.
Hey.
And why am I interested in this? I've been watching a lot of YouTube videos. I see Aisha, she's doing her thing, and I'm here for support and just to learn.
Thank you, Lionel. Who's next? Roderick?
Yeah, hello. What's good? My name is Roderick. I'm posted in the Bay Area right now, but at the moment I'm in Tallahassee, Florida, and I just felt like I had a lot to contribute in my own personal thoughts to this conversation. So, I'm excited, and thank you for having me.
We're excited to have you too. I'm excited to have you, and then we're all excited. Okay, who's next? Oh, Candace. I think Candace is the next one.
Hi, so my name's Candace, and I'm in LA currently. I'm excited to just share my perspective and show my support for my girl.
Thank you so much to all of you. I really appreciate all of you doing those mini introductions, giving me a little bit of perspective on why you came here. For those of you supporting and supporting my content, I appreciate it because I'm just trying to grow a community. But let's get into the first question because we got a lot of stuff to get through. So let's do that. The first question, of course, I'm going to start by introducing it. So to describe colorism and define it before we even get into the question. So colorism is discrimination based on skin color. And it's usually it usually happens within communities of color. And it is characterized as discrimination or prejudice towards members of the same race based on their skin color. So this can happen with people who are members of the same race, discriminating amongst each other. But this can also happen outside, people from outside looking in, making assumptions or attaching stereotypes to people based on their skin color, or even features as well. I would say that is all aligned together. So the first question that I have is in terms of preferences, because we hear this term a lot, dating preferences. Oh, it's just my preference. I just like this, I just like that. And so I'm wondering if, based off of all of your experiences, do you think that dating preferences are just preferences, or do you think that they inherently have a little bit of colorism sprinkled in it, sprinkled in that. Who wants to go ahead and start? Hey, Candace, go ahead, girl. Get it.
Just you reading the definition made me laugh, thinking back on like previous experiences. So I think it's a bit of both, actually. You know, I've dated in the past, I've had boyfriends where they were dark-skinned, and they would make comments about my dark skin, and it would always throw me off because I didn't understand, you know, like, why are you saying like, oh, your skin is dark, but you're dark too. I had a boyfriend who, at the time we were friends, we hadn't like gotten into a relationship yet, and he was dark skinned, like darker than me, and he had said that his preference was not dating dark skinned girls, and it was just crazy to me. Like, I remember like kind of interrogating him about that when he made that comment, because I could not understand, like, what do you mean you don't like dark skinned girls? Like, you are dark skinned yourself. Like, make this make sense. So I think it definitely has a little bit of both. Like, yes, you can have preferences, you know, but I feel like when it comes to skin color and skin tone, that's more of a like societal, like, I don't even know what the word is, but it's just like it relates to those stigmas that have to do with colorism versus it being a preference, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think it makes sense. And I would have to say also what I'm noticing is that you're saying that there's definitely like a little bit of separation between the two. They might have an interaction, but you see it as more of like they're different a little bit.
Yeah.
For me, I've noticed that I think that they're very much linked, but I do agree with you that there are some components where people just have preferences. But I do think that the way we're socialized and the way we perceive what is desirable is also has undertones of colorism, racism, anti-Blackness. So it's really hard to pull at it and really look and see, like, do I just like these people because I like them, or do I like them because of the way I was programmed to like? Does anyone else want to add to this question? Daniela, okay.
Yes, actually, I think it's interesting because at least like from my experience in the Caribbean, we have the chance of having like very diverse people and like a variety of skin colors and skin tones that you might not find in other Black communities. And what I find interesting is this idea that like the most desirable person is the Black person, but as long as she or he or they are like light-skinned, right? And I feel like it's constantly associated with maybe this idea that they're more beautiful because they have a few drops of, I would say, like white skin or white blood in their skin tone or complexion. And when you look at other mixed societies like Brazil, for example, where this idea is even more I would say anchored in the collective mind, where really like people think that dating someone who's white or light-skinned is a sign of social ascension. And I personally never had to say that. I traveled a lot, and I mainly dated in France, and I didn't have a chance to interact with a lot of the Black communities in France, actually, because a few of the schools I went to they were very immensely white. I was actually like, there was on a class of 150, there was only 2 Black girls in the whole class. So same for guys, actually, there was 1 Black guy in my class. So, but I think of course there's like preferences, but where do those preferences come from? Like, it's the idea that light-skinned girls and light-skinned women were constantly put in the forefront of media, shows, TV, movies. We think of actresses like, I don't know, when you think of 2000s like actresses, Black actresses, you think of like Halle Berry, not necessarily like, you have the different spectrum. You have like Halle Berry, but I don't know. It's the idea that it's very difficult to to disassociate this idea of social ascension and of you did it because you're dating a light-skinned girl, light-skinned guy.
Right? I think that's a really point to actually end your contribution, because that social ascension theme is about, again, you're saying like trying to reach for whiteness, trying to reach a level to be able to attain some kind of success. And because the way we're socialized is very much still based in that
but it's not necessarily conscious or written down, you know. I don't think like, I think maybe even I'm pretty sure even I have kind of internalized that kind of thinking, you know, and thinking like, well, if I date a white guy or light-skinned guy, you know, I'll be able to enter social spaces that I might not be able to because I'm dating a black guy. Like, I don't know, if one day he wants to take me out to a fancy restaurant, you know, will servers look down on us because he's black, or will the fact that he's light-skinned or like maybe white passing will allow me to just, you know, not be stared at as if we were like this black couple in the middle of like a very fancy or, you know, high society place, restaurant, whatever, shops, restaurants, you know, just spaces in general.
But I do think that what's really interesting about what you're saying, though, is I don't think there's any way you could say that is on a subconscious level. When you're talking about those kind of things where people are literally saying, this is my meal ticket, this is my key into success, this is my, and I want to hear from the black men, because you guys get a lot of heat in media about black men, athletes, successful black men, politicians, always picking light-skinned women to marry. And y'all might have your side chick be like brown skin or dark skin, but your main chick is like white or like white passing, just because, you know, you want to show that you made it. And I want to hear from y'all, like, what is your perspective on this? Who wants to go ahead? I need to hear from y'all, black man.
All right. For me, in my younger years, definitely colorism played a part of my like upbringing. You know, I'm light skinned. And I used to always get that, you know, my mother, sister tell me, don't stay out too late, you're gonna get too dark. So it was like rooted in me. And growing up, I used to internalize that and say like, oh wow, you know, I literally said this, I do not want a girlfriend who's darker than me. But, you know, years pass, I'm aware of, you know, the consequences of that, negative characteristics with that. And I don't believe that anymore, but it's the ideal, you know, the appeal to whiteness, straight hair, lighter skin, fairer skin. And that's, you know, that's taught throughout our school history. So it's like, it's very definitely like, so we're socialized to believe that. But as far as sports, I definitely see that. The black male figures with their white girlfriends. And I'm just like, man, like what's going on? But then also I think about like the people they're with, because, you know, not majority of the football teams or basketball teams, a lot of them do have a large like white fan base. So maybe when they go to I'm not saying like this is an excuse, but maybe their social circle are, you know, white people, and they're surrounded by nothing but white people. So that kind of limits their options to dating black people. So maybe that's the case. Now, I'm not saying like that's the case, but that could be a reason.
I do agree with you that, yeah, what you have around you definitely will make you decide, like you basically look, sometimes I've noticed with guys, sorry if I'm making a generalization, but sometimes it seems like you guys have tunnel vision. So if you're in a specific area with your career and, you know, you're in a circle, it's really hard for y'all to really go outside of that circle to like go find something. Whereas if you're already in a circle and you see beautiful women there, you're like, why would I go out of my way to go outside of this circle? And these women already know my lifestyle. They understand what I'm coming with. They understand when I hit a certain tax bracket. They already know what's happening. Why would I leave that to go outside to go find somebody? That's at least the idea that I get from a lot of these athletes is like, I'm just going to stick in my corner. But outside of the athletes, I want to talk about like the regular black guy. You know, I want to hear from y'all, Vadrik or Baba. Like, what is your perception on this idea of colorism impacting our preferences?
Well, as a regular black guy, I would say that dating while black, I mean, colorism, I feel like it hasn't really affected me so far, insofar as when I'm dating like, or when I'm in an area that's not like predominantly like black, because I feel like I'm like kind of like a unicorn, and I'm looked at as like, because I'm dark skinned or whatever, but I'm looked at as like, because it's not like a lot of black people there, I'm looked at as maybe like unique, or that I like stick out. And so I mean maybe that's a plus. And then just because of maybe how the way I carry myself, but I mean growing up, I feel like it also didn't really, hurt me too bad. And it just but I definitely saw like the imprint on colorism like growing up, and how just it seemed like there was an aversion to being dark, and like being dark was like looked down upon and frowned upon. And like in our adolescent years, that could have shaped a lot of our minds as far as like what we would consider like desirable or like worthy, when we had to like choose our partners for like our lifetime. And I'm just thankful that I got to see my beautiful black parents, being married, raise my beautiful black siblings, and I like with the self-confidence that like no matter what anybody says to you, like we are able to, shine. And and that's something I think does need to be, taught more and emphasized more, that, we have to unlearn a lot of these anti-black things within ourselves, and, overcome, things that will be stuck in the community, and things that, will hold us back. But I mean, for me personally, I feel like colorism has affected probably the women in my life more, because because my sister, I grew up, seeing her see herself not reflected, and seeing my sisters not reflected in the things that we like saw beautiful, like the Bratz dolls and like the women on TV, and just like the things that I saw, people out like the celebrities, not in my family, that who like the mates they were choosing. And so I feel like that affected them more. But like for me, I feel like I was able to maneuver around the colorism issue better. And when it has popped up, I was able to just like shrug it off more than what can have been done to like, I don't know, people who didn't grow up like me. And so I don't know. I just think a black environment, like an incubation, is necessary to like fight that.
It's interesting. Like an incubation period where you're surrounded by blackness and black love, so that it can inform how you decide to date. We're going to talk about this a little bit later on, but that's basically the last question, because it's really interesting how most of us may have different perceptions of what this black family looks like, how this black love looks like, and how that impacts how we choose to date after we experience things. Because some of us may not have the best experiences seeing our parents' relationships. Some of us may. So it's really interesting how that also impacts the people you choose to date when you get older. I see that I have a request from George to enter the chat. I wanted to ask Baba, do you have anything to say about this topic, or can we move to the next one?
We can move to the next one, but like for me, my context is slightly different because I grew up in Nigeria, so I was surrounded by black people throughout my life.
Yeah.
I guess slightly similar to Daniela. The question was like light skin versus like really dark skin. Growing up in Nigeria, I think I preferred the light skin girls. I didn't realize it then, but I think that was because of like society and like the narrative around who's beautiful. But like later on, I personally preferred dark skin girls. And so like now when my like, especially now, because in France, a lot of the dark skin girls around it like say things like, oh, I'm pretty sure you like white girls, and I'm confused because I never really understood this like was an issue. And I never understand why dark skin guys have an issue with like dark skin girls in some context and all that kind of stuff. But for me, I don't think I'm discriminating. It's just my preference, like who I feel like I'm like likely to relate with and who I feel at ease talking to and all that kind of stuff. So yeah.
Thank you, Baba. I think what I'm glad you were honest, because a lot of people are afraid of like, I guess speaking in their own truth and like standing in it. And the fact that you acknowledge that, yes, at the core, yeah, you definitely had a thing about light-skinned women, but now that has transitioned. We're definitely going to talk a little bit and explore this concept of the final, I guess, the attention or the glorification of dark-skinned women, and if that's even a good thing or a bad thing. But it's very interesting how now when certain people are being put on a platform on social media, the power that has to have implications on the real life of Black women, and it's even Black men. So it's very scary for me how strong like these social media platforms, the power that they wield. Because what if they decide that, you know, dark-skinned women are ugly, you know, or what if they decide light-skinned women are ugly, or a particular type is ugly? What are we always going to be controlled by this? It's just very interesting. I'm gonna add George in so that we can move on to the next question. But before we do that, he's gonna introduce himself, obviously. Okay, George, just introduce yourself, your location, and why you were drawn to joining this conversation today. And then we're gonna get into the next question.
All right.
You have the floor.
So my name is George Vanneman. I'm a Master of Ceremonies, MC. I'm an entertainment professional, a marketer, and a realtor. And I'm in Accra, Ghana right now. And you know, the whole Black love thing, you know, excites me. Anything that has to do with anything Black or my people, I'm all ready and willing to participate.
Well, thank you so much, George. That's really nice and kind of you. Thank you for joining us. We're gonna jump into the next question, and hopefully we get to hear from you. Okay, let's go into the next question. Second question I have for you all is in relation and inspired from a young woman who put in my IG story. She put a response and she said tribalism. That it'd be really interesting to talk about tribalism and dating experiences as Black people. And what I thought is I want to add tribalism, but I also want to put in religion and socioeconomic status, wealth. I think that those are things that are relatable across the board all over the world, because you just have to be considered that some like parts of the world don't have Black people that are part of tribes. But you know, for Africans, we know what she meant by that. That's a really big thing. So I wanted to ask you all, do you believe that a tribalism or religious sects, you know, groupings, and socioeconomic status, like different groups with different socioeconomic statuses, do you think that this makes dating easier or harder for Black people? Who wants to go ahead and start? Damn, nobody? Should I start?
Well, I can say I can talk.
Okay, George, go ahead.
All right. Tribalism has been a problem from day one. You know, in Africa, we have, well, let's say in my country, Ghana, we have people who are from different ethnic groups, different tribes. And trust me, some of them don't even like to unite with other tribes. There's a tribe in Ghana called the Ashantis. Forgive me, but they don't like to make the Ashanti people marry other people from other tribes. So from birth, your parents will tell you, if you bring a man or a woman from this particular tribe, trust me, we won't let the marriage happen. We won't let you marry the person. Yes, it's that serious. And when it comes to economic status, they'll tell you, okay, this is our family wealth. So you need to marry somebody from this particular tribe with the same kind of status. If you go and marry somebody from a different tribe, trust me, we will disown you.
Yeah, that's the word, disown. That's the harsh reality. Thank you so much, George. I'm gonna try to bring it to somebody from different parts of the world. Does anyone else can relate to this, or maybe they have a different experience navigating this whole idea of tribalism or religion? Or
I'm not from a different part of the world, so my experience is different.
Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, okay. I mean, for me, like, so I'm Nigerian. Obviously, we have tons of tribes in Nigeria as well, similar to Ghana. But for my family, there was never a rhetoric around like where the person you date should come from or what tribe and all that kind of stuff. Like, I dated people from like different countries and tribes which my parents know about or have known about, and like it was never like an issue. Like maybe within the wider society, like my extended family, there might be like a few like comments on the side and that kind of stuff. That usually happens, or jokes. But like nothing restricted. Like my family, we have people from different tribes who've married into the family, so we're used to it. And it's not a challenge. But when it comes to things like socioeconomic status and religion, that also makes it slightly complicated. For things like socioeconomic status, it's probably not said, but like you're probably sort of advised to be a bit more pragmatic or to think deeply about like the circumstances of your life after, while you date the person. If you choose to take it forward by becoming life partners or getting married or whatever, you really have to think about that carefully. that might not be the only thing that determines your relationship, but you should actually like think about it carefully, and that could make things slightly complicated. Religion makes it more complicated because I mean Nigeria religion is it's like a hot issue. My tribe / ethnic group, whichever one is politically correct, we're a bit more accepting of different religions. So like within the same family, you have people from multiple religious groups. But within the same wide family, you have people from different religious groups. But within like a nuclear family, you typically be like you typically belong to one religion. So that sort of complicates things as well. You have a few like couples who are like who've got different religions here and there, but typically people tend to like toe the same line. But yeah, not necessarily because they're like devout like followers of that religion, but because that's just like one, the social circle you tend to mix it, and it's easier to like, because in Africa like you sort of marry a family, or you date you don't date a family, but when you're like serious, it's like two families coming together. So you have to think very deeply about that and how you sort of handle those situations. And religion is quite tricky in Nigeria. But yeah.
So I think it's really interesting that you're talking about this perspective of, so for you, your family wasn't stressing about the tribe, but more so like you noticed that the religious, you actually said even in your family, religion is also not such a big deal for like, except like people don't have a big issue about it when you're like marry someone from
okay.
the faith.
So there's two things. So tribe, not a big deal.
Religion,
it's
getting hot.
Complicated.
Okay.
It's
money, socioeconomic
like,
status is red. What about socioeconomic status?
Socioeconomic, there's nothing is said about socioeconomic status, like.
But you just know, that, it's gonna come out, right?
It's not necessarily gonna come out. Like, it's not gonna be the first thing that's discussed. So like, obviously patriarchal society and all that. I'm a guy, so like the perspective for me is slightly different. But if it was like my female cousin or something, who was trying to marry sorry, I keep going to marriage because I'm thinking like long term and like when family and all these complications come together, and like dating someone who's from a different socioeconomic status, that's when the conversation might get slightly complicated, because if it's a guy, then you start thinking, well, heterosexual couple. If it's a guy, you start thinking, okay, well, what are they gonna like end up as? What's their like? Is he going to take care of my daughter? That's like the essential statement. Like, is he going to be able to take care of my daughter? And yeah, that's when it gets complicated.
So I wanted to hear a little bit more from the other people who are representing the diaspora. So my Americans, what is your perspective on this in terms of like religion, socioeconomic status, or even, this concept of tribe, or like the idea of having a clique, almost like, you just don't mess with those people right there. I wonder if there's this experience that you also have when you're dating.
So I'm going to speak from obviously the perspective of a first generation American, right? Okay. So for me, not growing up, like when I became older, I dated the first boyfriend that I had. He was Latin, right? And so I remember like having conversations with my grandma and my mom about this, and like my grandma would jokingly be like, that place is too far. Like we can't go there. So that sense of like, you need to marry somebody who is like closer to where we can go from Ghana. Was like, it wasn't something that was like hounded, but it was like, don't date there because that's too far. Or like the next boyfriend that I had, he was Nigerian, and that was like a big no. I like my family would be like, especially my grandma, she would be like, I never allowed any of my children to travel to Nigeria, and like we're not gonna start now. So like, no way are you gonna marry someone from Nigeria.
Baba's face was like, damn, I didn't even have a shot.
And then, so yeah, that's kind of like the whole tribe thing. But then thinking about like, in terms of other Ghanaians, they never really had comments about like, because we're Fantis. They never said like, oh, you have to be with someone Fanti or whatever. That wasn't a thing, but it was more so like other countries, especially other African countries. That was like a iffy thing. When it comes to religion, they never really made comments, but for me personally, I felt like I wanted to be with someone who shared my religious beliefs, because I just feel like that's something that is such a huge and important part of a relationship. Like I'm Christian, so I wanted to be with someone who was Christian, who would be able to pray with me and, you know, just understand my ideals and perspective on certain aspects in life. And when it comes to socioeconomics, I mean, it wasn't really something that was talked about. But again, for me personally, I would want someone who's like in the same bracket or like higher. I wouldn't want hold on. Like, I get the like, I get the whole idea of like, you know, people struggle, right? Like, you go through different phases, but it's like, I guess the person has to have like ambition. Like, I don't want to be with someone who, like, in terms of when it mostly happens, well, I'm going to speak from like being in LA, right? A lot of people are like, oh, I want to be a rapper. Oh, I want to do, you know, X, Y, and Z. But then you actually have no legitimate plan as to how you're going to go about doing that. And that's just not something that I personally can rock with. Like, I need you to have goals. I need you to have ambition. I need you to have a plan as to how you're going to get to the end goal. And like, yeah, I can help you get there. But like, if you're just like, oh, I'm trying to make music, and then like your music is trash, like, you need to be realistic.
She said trash. Oh, I'm hurt. Okay, Vadrik, I saw you. Vadrik, go ahead. The floor is yours. What were you gonna say?
I just want to say, I think it's great that, you know, we can have these talks with such honesty and transparency, you know, these real serious issues. So I want to say, like, that's just really awesome. And I mean, in my experience, you know, my family is from like the deep South, and so we don't have like tribes and all that to like identify ourselves by, or to, you know, not identify ourselves by. We just have, you know, our race. And so as black people, as like really black people from like Carolina and Florida, you know, our thing, and like I grew up, you know, being raised with the mindset that like we were like our own people in a way, like we were our own people type of thing. And, you know, the intermixing and dating wasn't relegated to like dissing other black people. It was more so, you know, the others were like white people who are like the dominant population in the country. And, you know, as we got older, you know, we moved to different places, and, you know, it was more of a mixed bag. So you had black people and white people, and the biggest, you know, I would say no would be, you know, like my family grew up like we Baptist and, you know, middle class, and so it was never a matter of like don't date them or like we looking down on them or looking up. You know, it was more so you would probably get side-eyed or like looked at funny like if you brought like a white person home or like a Spanish person home. And so we were more resigned to, you know, want to intermingle with just black people. And we are predominantly Christian again, so it wasn't a matter of, oh, they have a weird religion or they think differently than we do, because we all pretty much thought the same. And so these concepts are really like new to me as I like grow up and travel and move. I moved to California, and then I really start to see like firsthand like the diversity of not just America but of like the whole world. And so it's definitely been a big eye-opening experience. And I mean, it's just, again, these are things that I'm learning. So most of these things are really alien to me because I've always grown up to see the world as just black and white, or race in a race context, and then in like a middle class context. And so I definitely understand like what y'all are saying, but I guess I just didn't ever look at it that way. And I don't know, it's just very interesting to see and like understand. And so I guess my view was in a very simplistic American form. And yeah.
But I do want to, Vadrik, add into what you're talking about, because that also what your belief and the way that you see the world as black and white, that's also something that I think that you could characterize as a specific form of culture in itself. because I grew up in the U.S. for most of my life, and different regions have different cultures. They have different vibes. So when we're talking about tribes and tribalism, when you hear tribe, you're thinking a specific connotation, but in the simplistic form, you're really thinking about the most condensed form of having a way of being, a way of doing things, a way of dancing, of creating music, of eating. So when you think of that, you can think about how New York is completely different from LA. You can think about how Florida is completely different from Louisiana. You can think about how different Texas is from, I'm trying to think, Wisconsin. Like, so when you're thinking about the tribes, I want you to also imagine that within the landscape of where you are as well, because there are definitely differences when you're dating a guy from New York. In my experience, they tend to be a little bit more like, hey, what's good? Whereas in LA, it's kind of like, hey, you want to hang out sometime? Or it's very chill and relaxed. So sometimes you don't even know if they like you. But in New York, they're like, and in Africa, they're like, I'm going to marry you today. So it's very, I want you to realize that also, like, there is this idea of still lingering. Where Black people, we always find a way to make ourselves, seasoned with some kind of extra, culture. So
I wanted to chime in on what you were saying about like the different states and how there are low-key like different tribes in those areas. Because for me, like growing up in LA is so diverse. Like you literally have every type of person here. Like all the schools I went to, I always had a mix of people. When I got to college, my friend group, we used to call ourselves like the United Nations, because we had a friend from every continent in our friend group. And, everyone got along, and it wasn't something that was forced on you. But then when I moved to New York to go dance, I thought it was going to be the same as LA, because, they always say New York is the melting pot. But I quickly realized that it's so different. Yes, there's so much diversity as in LA. However, the groups are all segregated. So therefore, they're not really interacting with one another, and they don't really understand other cultures versus like in LA, you could be Black, you have a Hispanic friend, you have a Latin friend, you have an Asian friend, and you guys, mix with one another's cultures. In New York, it's not like that. Everybody kind of stays in their little bubble. I had an Asian roommate who literally told me that before meeting me, she thought that all Black people sold drugs and were in gangs. And so meeting me has changed her perspective. And that literally blew my mind, because she was a 20-something-year-old girl who had grown up in New York. Like she was born and raised in New York. So imagine, like, you would think that having that perspective, you're coming from, another country, but homegirl was like raised in New York. And so it's just, there are these little segregated communities that then constitute these tribes.
Yeah, and I want to add into that as well that, people say this is a melting pot in New York or whatever, but I consider it to be a salad bowl. Everybody maintains itself. We sometimes intermingle, we use lingo. I hung out with a lot of Dominicans because I grew up in New York. So we were cool, but there was always like, when I would go to their homes, I would hear like, oh, she's different from the other ones. So it's like, and that's what I'm talking about when we're talking about dating. It's very different from being friends. A lot of people will accept different friends and be all diverse. But then when it comes to who you're going to marry and who you're going to choose to spend your life with and have a romantic relationship with, that is very different. And I think people tend to be more strict about that. Because then it's like, how do you present that person to your family and how will they be received? Daniela, go ahead. We're actually running a little bit late. So if you can kind of limit it so that we can move, because I don't want to take too much of your time.
Sure. I actually first, when you asked your question, I first thought that I wouldn't be able to chime in. Like, my parents are African, but how to say that? I didn't really grow up in a very African environment. Like, I grew up in the Caribbean, and I was, as you said in the first question, who you date depends. Like, that's what Lionel said, I think. Who you date really heavily depends on your social circles, like what school you go to, what neighborhood you live in, what kind of work you're doing. And of course, like, naturally, the people you're going to meet are more likely to be the people in your social economic status, right? It's kind of funny because I think for me it comes down more to the diversity mindset. Like when I lived in New York for 2 years, I dated this Black guy actually for like a year and a half, and one of the things I had such a hard time, you know, we met at a school party, but he wasn't from the school, so he was from a very different social environment, and he used to just be so, like, how to say that, he used to be very close-minded. He saw people as like boxes and nationalities, and so each nationality had their own language, and he couldn't really fathom the idea that people could like travel and were born in a country and grow up in another one, and therefore kind of just not necessarily fit to the stereotypes that you would expect from certain cultures, well, you know, like an African person is very different from a Caribbean person, and that's even more the case if they grew up in other regions. And I feel like at least personally it would be difficult for me to date someone who doesn't necessarily understand that kind of diversity. And I think Candice's comment was so relevant. Like I never went to LA, but it's true that people kind of present New York as this huge melting pot, but all the communities do stay kind of segregated. When I went to school, like in New York, it's like you'd see all the Black kids on one side, the white kids on one side, like the Asian kids on one side. And, you know, even though I was so happy because I met people who were like, yeah, my dad is Vietnamese, my mom is Puerto Rican. I was like, yo, that's dope. But it's definitely not as a mixing pot as it's kind of like where it's kind of known for, you know.
Well, thank you so much. We just got through the second question. So what I'm gonna do is kind of condense the next two. It was supposed to be next three, but I'm gonna try to bring it in. So at this point, we don't have that much time left. So if you feel like you don't have anything really, really important to say, don't say anything. I'm really sad that I have to say this because I want to usually hear from everyone when I pose questions, but don't repeat what anyone has said already if you already heard it. If you just want to say, I second that, whatever this person said, go ahead, because we don't have that much time. So the next question, I'm so sorry. The next question is, you know, based off of this idea of dating, you know, different people, but this time around, we're going to be talking about interracial dating and fetishism. So this is a two-part question because I had to bring it together. The first part is, you know, is it possible to date interracially and still be pro-Black? And then as a follow-up to that question, you know, in terms of fetishization, how does that impact who and how you choose to date? So whichever one of those questions you feel like you have something to answer or respond to, go ahead. Go on. Whoever wants to start.
I can go ahead. Like, I only started dating once I left high school. So when I left the Caribbean for France, and of course, like the majority of people in France are like white people. And funnily enough, because my school was so diverse, the first guy I dated was from Eastern Europe, and his ex-girlfriend was also Black because they had met in an international school when he was growing up in Eastern Europe. But how to say this? I think you can be, I think it's hard to say that if you're in an interracial relationship, you can, by being Black and by taking your Black experiences into account when you're dating, I think that's being pro-Black. How to say that? I don't think growing up in when you grow up in a white majority environment, you're necessarily going to be more likely to date white people. Does that make you less pro-Black? Maybe I think maybe in the eyes of others, probably like I totally support Black love and, you know, Black couples, Black power, like, you know, it depends where you're growing up. I think in the US, it's a discussion kind of really related to the US, to colorism, as we've discussed. Like, is there a conscious choice to date only white people or people who are not from your race? It's a legitimate question, but I don't think, like, I don't know, I've been kind of vocal about like Black issues, especially in this circle, which was not majority Black, and I had to kind of talk about my Blackness with my boyfriends. Sometimes, sometimes discuss about those problems, and the effort you put into like the effort we shouldn't have to put into educating our white friends and our white boyfriends or white partners in general is something that.
I'm going to push back on something you said a little bit, because I don't think it's a completely US-centric thing. And I've spent a little bit of time in France, and I've noticed, there's interracial dating is a huge thing here. It's almost like people are naturally inclined to do that here. I've noticed that I've seen a lot of mixology here,
You think so?
I support it. If you find the right person for you, you find it. My only concern when it comes to being pro-Black is that when you find that you're spending most of your time explaining your Blackness to your white friends, you do not have enough time to contribute and to pour into your Black community. So the time you're spending going and explaining your Black experience to your boyfriend and your friends, sure, that might make them more open to being conscious about how they treat Black people in the world. Sure, it might lead to them being better allies to Black people. And we could even talk about if allyship is even a real thing. But I personally think that you can be pro-Black when you date interracially, but it makes it harder because you're spending less time with your community and more time explaining what your community is about. I want to hear from somebody else, and then we're going to move to the next question because we don't have enough time.
Okay, so I'm going to chime in.
You
want to go?
Badrick, go ahead, and then Candace, you can jump in. Is that okay, Candace?
It doesn't matter.
Okay.
I just want to say I respect everything that Daniela was saying. In my mind, man, hell no, you can't be pro-Black and interracially date. Just know, in my mind, in my context, pro-Black is the understanding of progressively Black. So you are blackity Black to the umpteenth, and it's not to diss, interracial dating or mixed couples or whatever, but in my opinion, that mindset that you have to be in to be pro you and pro your people and pro Black is just something that you can't do while having jungle fever. You feel me? Like if you are in a mixed relationship, like you can't say Black Lives Matter. You gotta say all lives matter, which is fine. Like you can say that, but the thing is and then as far as it goes with representing your people, and you don't have to be like pro-Black isn't anti-white. Like that's not the thing. It is just the understanding that all of you, like socially, politically, economically, you put your attention to, Black people, and some may find a problem with that, some may not, and that has to also go with romantically. And as far as racial fetishism goes, I'll just say this quickly. I feel like we Black people, we tend to fetishize. Maybe it's Black American people, but we tend to fetishize, we call anything that's not, blonde hair, blue eyes foreign. And so I think that's like a problem within ourselves. And I feel like we fetishize others more than they fetishize us, because their fetishization is usually looking at us as like something lesser, and ours is looking at theirs as something better. And I think that's an issue that we need to have. And that's a talk that, we need to have seriously. But I think that's a problem within our community. But again, I respect everything that y'all are saying.
I do want to add to the fetishization thing that is also, I've noticed that it's usually people outside of our race also that do it a lot more. It's this idea of like, oh, if this person has this kind of body, or like the fetishization of Black men and how you guys are well endowed compared to other races, and how basically like women are thirsty for y'all just for sex, but not to really get to know who you are, not to really get to know what kind of person and personality you have, but just for what you could do for them. And that's unfortunate, but those are some of the things that I think fetishization, that's where it's like, it's really sad because it dehumanizes Black people even further. Candace, you can go ahead, and then we're gonna go into the last question.
Okay, so just based upon my experiences with friends that I have, it's in contrast to what Vadrick was saying. I think you can definitely be pro-Black and be in an interracial relationship. I have close friends now who they're Black women dating white men, and they're not out there saying all lives matter. They are still very much involved with Black Lives Matter, as is their partners. Like, their partners are the ones educating themselves. And I think that like touches on what Daniela was saying earlier, like, you know, she's educating her friends and whatnot. Like, they need to be willing to do the work themselves. It's not your job to educate them. And that's how your relationship can work. You know, my friend and her now husband, they just got married a couple weeks ago. They, from the beginning, have been out there protesting together, like trying to bring awareness to these issues. So I think it's very not the right thing, for lack of a better term, for us to say that. And I think it's irresponsible for us to say that if you are Black, you therefore cannot say Black Lives Matter because your partner is not Black. If your partner is making the conscious effort to educate themselves on these issues, then I don't see why it's a problem.
All right, that was a very thick discord, but that's what I like though, because I like that everyone's bringing their own perspectives. Some of us may not agree, some of us may, or in impartiality. Like, I agree with what everyone has said in some parts, but not all. You know, because I do think, again, I want to reiterate, you can be pro-Black and date interracially, but I do think that it makes it harder, and I do think you have to navigate those waters differently. You're not going to be able to pour into your own community or into yourself the way I think you would if you're already dealing with people in your own community. But then again, there's toxic Black people too. So, and there's Black people who take your time as well. So anyway, let's go into the last question, because I want to take care of everyone who has to leave right on the dot. So the last question is pertaining to Black families and Black love and the essence of Black love. I do believe in Black love, but every single day I have to wake up, and I think this is part of being pro-Black as well, is like really waking up and seeing all of the discord, all of the toxicity, and still seeing also all of the beauty that we have to offer to each other and how much more we can progress as a community and as a collective. I do believe in Black love, but I'm curious to hear from all of you. Do you think that Black people have the tools necessary to create, flourishing relationships, healthy romantic relationships and families? Do you believe that, considering all of the struggles, the racism, the socioeconomic disparities, the health disparities, all the things that we're dealing with on a consistent basis, do you really believe that we have the tools necessary to love each other and love on each other? Who wants to go ahead and answer? Well, damn, nobody believes that we can love on each other?
I can go, but I didn't want to be the first person again to just kind of chime in.
Go on.
I think we can, but we have to be conscious of it. We have to be conscious of all the pain that has kind of gone through our community, whether we're African, whether we're, Caribbean people, and especially Caribbean people who have like so many, we've known slavery and it's kind of inscribed in our bodies. Like my family is from like enslaved people in Brazil, and which was the last country to actually abolish slavery. And it's kind of this, there's this, there's this concept of generational curses, which are both like, there can be poverty, there can be low socioeconomic status, but it can also be like intimate violence. It can be like, all those things that are cursing Black people in particular, that have to be, we as young millennials, I think we have the tools to be more aware, more conscious of those generational curses, and to change our communities so they can be like more loving, more kind, and also more inclusive, I'm thinking about like LGBTQ Black people. I'm thinking about disabled Black people that might not have had the representation that they did. Sorry, I'm chewing my words. These groups that may not have had like the representation that they deserved like a few years ago, and who might have been like more victims of these generational curses than other people. And I think they are speaking, and we as a generation are speaking louder about those problems. And I think there's hope about that.
Thank you, Daniela. Does anyone else have something to add? Do Black people have the tools necessary to love on each other, to produce healthy families, healthy communities? George, do you have something to say? George, who was really loving Black love in the beginning when you came in.
Well, I think we do have all the tools, because I mean, Black people are naturally strong people. You know, our race is a unique race. We are all over the world, and we have different cultures. Like, we are diverse. So if I look at another culture and I come from a different culture, and we're all Black, whether you're African American, whether you're African, whether you're from Jamaica, from any part of the world, you have your culture, I have mine. Why won't we just fuse it and use the tools we have? If you're American like this and I'm African, probably maybe the hustle here is different in Africa. Your hustle is different in America, but we are still Black. We think we actually, you know, Mama Africa unites us all. Mama Africa unites us all. It's about that time people know that all Black people are from Africa. If you know this, then you definitely know that we all have the tools to love one another or love each other. Trust me. If you know that, I mean, it's like knowing you're from the same family or from the same land. Definitely, it's all your mindset. Definitely, you should know that I can love the person from my land. But there lies a case where we've all dispersed to other places. So some African Americans don't even want to date Africans. Trust me. I've met women who are Africans, like African Americans, and they don't want to date Africans because they say African men are lazy, because African men are looking for women to exploit, and we just want to use them to get a green card to come to America. But darling, no, I love my Africa, I love my Ghana. If I want to marry you, I would even love to beg you to even come and stay in Ghana with me. Understand me? Because I have the tools. I'm an African man. You have the tools. If I'm Nigerian, I'll tell you the same. I don't know about my Nigerian brother here, but I'll tell you the same. African American woman, look, I love you for who you are because you're Black, and Black is beautiful. So I don't need your green card. I just want to show you love. And Mama Africa, we are from the same land. So come home and let me show you the real home love. You understand what I mean? So we have the tools.
You making some women look at you right now. They're gonna look for your profile because you're over here talking smooth. Yeah.
My Nigerian brother should say something. I mean, we're from the same land, so we definitely have the tools. We know that we all have the tools. Whether, you know, you left here 400 years ago or 500 years ago, you're still from this land. So you know how we do it. You know the tools we use to love one another.
But I think the tough part is having the tools. And actually, in my question, inherently, what I was also thinking about is, can we apply them? I think the hard part is what Daniela is talking about, where we have trauma. A lot of us have dealt with generational curses that live in us, and we have trauma that sometimes keep us from applying the tools. We may know what's the right way to treat people, but then we still end up creating this toxic web of hurting one another. There's a lot of infidelity, physical abuse, sexual trauma that a lot of people don't know how to process. So when they do find each other in a romantic relationship, that's where it comes out, because that's the person that's closest to you. So do you have the tools to apply what you do know is right? Do you have the tools to go beyond your pain to love, your partner, your Black partner? How I think that's the real question that I wanted to pose when I was thinking of this question. That we can have one final comment.
I was going to say, I feel like we actually don't have those tools. And it takes a conscious effort in us having to go and educate ourselves to be able to apply those tools. You can base it on something as simple as communication. Like, if you look at, how the Black community communicates with one another on just a day-to-day basis, not even in terms of a relationship, it's pretty toxic, And so if we're not making that conscious effort to educate ourselves on interpersonal communication and relationships, then that toxic cycle continues, and you don't ever really get to experience the fullness of what Black love is like if you yourself are toxic at the core. That's my bit.
That's a word. You said if you yourself is toxic, and I think, Baba, were you gonna say something? Baba,
yeah,
you can go ahead and then I'll close it
I'm
off.
just gonna respond to both Candice and George. I think we have the tools, but we just have to unlearn a lot of things, which is slightly similar to what Candice just said, but it's also different in the sense that, like, things like communication, like, the tools are out there. We know how to, communicate correctly or love well and all that kind of stuff. But from what generational curses and things you've seen, like things you see in the generation before you do, you've learned a lot of things that are like deeply seated within your consciousness and like that are hard to like change even after many years. So regardless of the fact that we know how to do these things, sometimes you find yourself doing the wrong thing just because that's how we do it, or that's how you've seen it done in the past. And I think it's that unlearning part that is a bit, it's difficult. And once you can unlearn a lot of those things that we see within our communities, then we can move on to the next stage of actually applying those tools, as it were.
Well, now that I'm
That's
here, though, I'm starting to think that perhaps maybe we don't have the tools, because like, you know, what Candace is saying and what you're saying, what I've just heard is making me lean towards that part more. I think that we recognize love, and we know what is love, and we know what is healthy. And we know that because we know what it means to be in a toxic situation that is unhealthy. Majority of Black people that I know have faced some kind of trauma in some kind of way. It's just the way we're brought into this world. The way the power dynamics are set us up to be predisposed and to have high exposure to trauma and to high intensive environments that can cause you to just break. This world was not made for us to survive and thrive. And so we're thriving even beyond that, kind of following up what George was saying, because we're strong, we're resilient, we're amazing, we're beautiful. But just like anything that has to overcome, there's a price to pay. And I think a lot of us are grinders. We work so hard that we don't take the time to sit down with ourselves to really, what you're talking about unlearning is also about looking at ourselves and really like acknowledging all the things that we've been through. And I know for a fact, I know a lot of people that do not do that. They do not know how to sit down with themselves, be honest, address the traumas they've experienced. I know a lot of people who know how to ignore it. I know a lot of Black people, especially in Africa, especially with Black men, they're just taught to just keep it all in. They don't like to show weakness, vulnerability. They like to stay quiet. They don't want to talk about it. But then that stays, and that's how you see a lot of our dads. They don't talk a lot. They're very mysterious. They're always sitting there quietly. You don't know what happened. Then you find out there's 10 other kids that he has. But you know, and it's like, it's not that the man doesn't love your mom or that he's a hateful person. It's that he probably doesn't even know how to love himself. So he's going out there pouring and trying to find women to make him feel better. So there's a lot of psychology in all of this. So it's making me think that perhaps not a lot of us don't have the tools, but I do think the tools are out there. So we're going to close it out. But I appreciate everybody.
Oh, sorry.
Oh, Daniela, you wanted to... some of y'all said you had to leave on the dot, so I was trying to respect that. I didn't want to keep you guys. Roderick, you have to go, right? And Daniela as well.
Yeah, actually. But I just wanted to like point out the growing number of especially Black women who are kind of, you know, doing the work and actually kind of being the people in the communities who are trying to, who are doing the grind to educate themselves to, you know, unlearn those traumatic experiences and the pains and heal their own wounds, but also trying to bring that knowledge to other people. Like there's so many, I don't know, there's so many social, especially on social media, on Instagram and Facebook, so many groups of like Black women talking about like psychology. That's kind of how I learned about generational curses and all that. And I think it's important to see that this number is growing, and I still want to stay optimistic. So I kind of just wanted to end on an optimistic note. Yes, there is, you know, people from the past generation. You know, I'm thinking about my own dad too. Like my dad doesn't have 10 other kids in the family, but he is very much like he's very much the mysterious, and he doesn't have fair enough. But he's not expressing his own feelings, and I think it's something that our generation is learning slowly to do that. So, you know, there's hope for the future.
I agree with you, Daniela. There is hope for the future. I'm just hoping that, you know, whoever we all end up with or whoever you're with currently is able to accept and receive your love. And I think that's the main thing about, you know, the struggle of Black people having the tools and being able to apply them is that they will be received. And sometimes it's so hard because somebody has to go, each person has to go through their own healing journey to be able to accept and receive love and recognize it. There's so many people, you tell them you love them every day, they still will not receive it because they're not in that space. So I want to thank everybody again for coming and engaging in this discussion. I feel like we need another part. We need to talk about so much more. But I appreciate all of you taking your time to come and engage in this amazing discussion. And I look forward to seeing you all on some kind of platform in the future, internet or in real life when COVID ends. I appreciate you all. Have a wonderful evening or day, wherever you are, afternoon.
Thank you so much, Aisha.
Thank you.
Peace to y'all beautiful people, man.
Bye.
Bye. I'm going to sit around to watch everybody leave.
Bye.
I'm gonna stick around because I want to chat with you.
It's been a long time, girl.
I know. I'm so sad I didn't get to see you when you were out here.
Girl, I had to go. I had to go.
Well, hello, beautiful people. Thank you so much for taking the time to watch this latest episode of WiseAïchaTalks. You just watched the Dating While Black panel. I had such an amazing time organizing this discussion, and I want to thank each and every one of the panelists for coming, being brave, and just opening up and sharing their perspectives. Now, this panel does not represent all Black people, but it represents a specific portion, and I hope that each of you can continue these conversations within your own circles. I want to thank you for watching this episode, and please make sure to like, subscribe, comment, and share. Please let your girl know that you're watching and supporting. Make sure you comment below on things that you're interested in or different ideas or topics that came to mind based off of this discussion. And just let me know that you are feeling my vibes and you are feeling what I'm putting out. I appreciate you all, and I'll see you all soon online or somewhere. Okay, bye.